Let's look at a few ways in which we can shoot long exposures in camera to blur motion. A popular subject for this technique is of course water. Long exposures give water a smooth, almost creamy appearance and can temper and calm what would otherwise be a very busy image. The softening of the water is often quite pleasing to the eye, and it helps the water sit more comfortably within the frame rather than dominating it. To achieve this effect, we need a way of slowing down our shutter speed, so we basically want to reduce the amount of light entering the lens. If we don't cut down the light, we'll easily overexpose the images in most daylight situations. My preferred method is by using a circular neutral density filter, but you can also use square filters with a filter bracket. Notice how much light this filter is cutting out. You can barely see through it. Circular filters come in two forms, variable and fixed. Variable ND filters allow you to control how much light is blocked, but due to their design you can often end up with vignetting at and near the strongest setting. Fixed ND filters are obviously less flexible as they offer a set amount of light reduction, but you won't get vignetting. Let's look at a variable ND filter then. So here I've got my camera set to manual mode, and I'm going to stop down quite far to f14. But to get the shutter speed lower without overexposing, I'll start turning the front ring on the ND filter, and we can gradually see the image getting darker on screen. Now we can reduce the shutter speed all the way to 6 seconds, which will give us that motion blurred look to the water. Before snapping away though, I'm going to access the shooting options and change the shooting mode to a 2-second timer. This will ensure there's no camera shake from me pressing the shutter button. Now I can press the shutter button, the timer will count down, and after waiting for 6 seconds, we'll get to see our captured image. There we go. And after a bit of editing, we end up with this. Let's try our hand at another example with the variable ND filter. I'm in manual mode again here. First, I'll check focus to make sure the frame is acceptably sharp. Then I'm going to slowly increase the aperture until we're stopped down at f14. This allows me to lower the shutter speed, but then of course I can again rotate the front of the variable ND filter and you can see the camera's exposure meter decreasing to -2.3. I can gradually lower the shutter speed further until it's going to produce a 6-second exposure. Again, across on my shooting mode menu, I'm going to switch to a 2-second timer, as this will allow me to ensure there's no camera shake at the beginning of the exposure. And away we go, pressing the shutter button. 6 seconds later, and we have our image. So, 6 seconds is okay, but let's push it further and get some longer exposures. For this, I'm going to turn to fixed strength ND filters. So I'm going to start using filters that are rated at ND 1000 and ND 2000. Now then, the crucial difference with a much stronger and non-variable filter is that once we put it on, our viewfinder or live view effectively goes dark and it becomes very difficult to see our framing and check focus. Therefore, it makes sense to do these two steps beforehand. So, I've stopped down to f4 and checked that the exposure is good, and I'm now going to put the filter on. It's a 72mm thread filter, so I've used a couple of step-down adapters to make it fit my standard lens, which has a 62mm thread. Once the filter is on, we can no longer see anything properly through the live view. I'm in aperture priority mode, and the camera is proposing a 4-second exposure. I'm going to set my shooting mode to a 2-second timer, again so the camera is hands-free when the shutter is being fired, and I'll do a test shot to see how far off the metering could be. As it turns out, it's off by quite a bit. I'll try bumping the exposure compensation up by 2 stops and taking another shot. Still way too underexposed. Let's bring it up to 3 stops and try again. Getting there, but we still need a longer exposure. Time to push it to 4 stops. Now, at this point, I'm worrying that we're going to need longer than 60 seconds, which would necessitate shooting in bulb mode. However, as this next image is exposing, the sun comes out halfway through and lights up the area, which provides just that perfect balance. So with the shot in the bag, this is the one I take further to edit. Here's the finished version. Just one more example then. I'll double check focus before putting the filter on and stop down to f4, taking a quick test shot to make sure the exposure is okay. Then it's time to put the filter on. Again, it's a 72mm filter, so I need some step down rings to make it fit my 62mm lens thread. Once again, our live view is pretty much blacked out. I'll set a 2-second timer, then fire off a test shot to see where we're at with the camera's metering. As expected, quite underexposed. Not a problem, we'll push the exposure compensation up to 2 stops and try again. Getting there, some of the shadow tones are underexposed and we've still got a little bit of latitude to capture the highlight detail in the water, so we'll go for a 3-stop exposure compensation. And that does the trick. The camera reports a slight overexposure, but I'm not worried as this histogram is from a fully tone mapped JPEG with a tone curve applied. I'm shooting JPEG plus RAW, so that highlight detail will definitely be available in the RAW file. Here's the finished version with some editing. Alright, I must confess I prefer circular filters, but we'll also look quickly at square filters, which are held in front of the lens via a filter holder. With this shot, I'm in aperture priority mode, and I'll fine-tune the focus. Then I'll stop down to f4 and take a shot to check the exposure. Okay, that works. So now I can begin putting the ND filters on. We'll see here that I'm sliding the filter into one of the available slots on the filter holder. Most filter holders have about 3 slots, meaning you can stack multiple filters and have greater control over how much light you're cutting out. So I'm going to stack a second filter to further reduce the available light. So this gives us an exposure time of 4 seconds, but as with the previous examples, the camera's metering will be thrown off, probably by at least a stop. Indeed, if I set the shooting mode to a 2-second timer, then take the shot, we'll see it's heavily underexposed. I'll push the exposure compensation up by 2 stops, giving us a 15-second exposure time. And there we go, a much better result. Now, as we can see, the result is extremely low contrast. Just be wary that if you go for cheaper square filters, you'll tend to get issues like low contrast and sometimes extreme color casts. These are correctable in post to a degree, but I've often found that equivalently priced circular filters tend to offer better results. Of course, if you're paying the usual amount for renowned brands, then you're less likely to deal with these issues to begin with. As with everything else in the business of photography, you get what you pay for. So there we go. I hope that's been an interesting trip into experimenting with long exposure photography on water-based subjects. You can see the accompanying article and example images by following the link in the description. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the other videos on my channel.